thanks everybody for coming. Welcome to the Al Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. We have a series of talks I think are always very interesting. Today I'm particularly excited. When I went to University of Illinois about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, I met Dr. Katsikas, and we talked about something I had never. Granted, I'm not the most educated person in the world. My students will be alarmed to hear that, but I learned about the origins of Muslim political activity in Bulgaria, and it was just a part of history, recent history, that I had no clue about. I was absolutely fascinated by it, and it struck me as being particularly relevant considering some of the other events we've done in the past on Muslims in South Africa and Muslim activism against apartheid, and then current Muslim political activism in South Africa. So I thought this would be really interesting, and I immediately extended an invitation for him to come and lecture here. And I will consider myself the primary audience beneficiary here. Stefanos Katsikas is the head of the study for modern Greek studies program, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And you moved there relatively recently, right?
Last September,
yeah. His research interests focus on the study of democratization, reconciliation, and regional security in the Balkans, in both contemporary and historical studies. Recent publications include Negotiating Diplomacy in the New Europe, Foreign Policy in Post-Communist Bulgaria, which is 2011. This is this book, yeah. Which received a Sculodi Publication Award in 2011. I've never won an award, so respect. He's the editor of Bulgaria and Europe, Shifting Identities, 2010, and the guest editor of European Modernity and Islamic Reformism amongst Muslims in the Balkans in the late Ottoman and post-Ottoman period, 1830s to 1945. That's extremely interesting, which is a special issue of Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, December 2009. Make sure I look that up.
it's in my luggage in the hotel. This is one of the things.
You have an extra copy?
Yes, I have.
Oh, to go pilfer your hotel room. Anyway, so I won't take up any more time, and go ahead. I see you have. By the way, if you're my student, sign your name. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, for your kind words, and thank you everybody for being here for this talk. Well, when I started working my slides for the presentation, it's always puzzling. I mean, you don't know where to pitch your lecture. So I started from the very basic thing, very basic stuff. For instance, how many Muslims live in Bulgaria, where is Bulgaria, and so on. And then I will try to focus my presentation on something which the Bulgarians like to call the Bulgarian ethnic model, by which they mean that in the post-communist period, the country has succeeded in creating a really good model of coexistence between Bulgarian Christians and Muslims there, and they would wish, and they wish to export this to the rest of the Balkans. I mean, the extent to which this is true, it's a different story. But let me start first by page down. Yes, showing a map of where Bulgaria is. I don't want to underestimate the knowledge of everybody, but because Bulgaria has been a very peaceful country in the Balkans. In the 1990s, everybody was interested in Yugoslavia and the ethnic conflicts in Yugoslavia. However, there is a quite sizable minority, Muslim minority, in Bulgaria. Bulgaria lies in the southeast of the Balkans, and it shares borders with Greece, now with Serbia, in the past with Yugoslavia, in the north with Romania, south also with Turkey, and in the east with the Black Sea. Now, Islam is the largest minority religion in Bulgaria, and Muslims, there is the largest religious minority in the country. According to the 2011 census, for example, the total number of Muslims living in Bulgaria were recorded to be 577,139 people, which means 7.8% of the total population in the country. Well, I have to say that the number was bigger in the past. I mean, for example, in the communist times and before the Second World War, it was up to 12%. You may ask me what happened to the rest of the people. Well, first of all, some of them decided to migrate after the collapse of communism, and they followed the general trend of the population. Economic decline in the country led many people to start to look for jobs elsewhere. But also there is something else that happened at the end of the communist period, about which I'm going to talk in a couple of minutes, which was an attempt by the communist regime in Bulgaria to forcibly change the names of the Muslims in an attempt to assimilate them with the ethnic majority. And this led about 300,000 people outside the country. Now, in terms of ethnic compositions, the Muslims of Bulgaria were made of Turkish-speaking people, Bulgarian-speaking Muslims, which are known as Pomaks, not only in Bulgaria but elsewhere in the Balkans. There are Pomaks living in Greece, for example. There are Pomaks living in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. As you can see, as a Greek, I avoid using the name Macedonia because I don't know how many of you are in, and there is a name dispute about the issue. But there are Pomaks in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia or Macedonia, in Greece, in Bulgaria, and elsewhere in the Balkans. And also Roma, gypsies. Well, gypsies is not a political correct term, but it is a term used by many people, the non-Muslims in the Balkans. They call this ethnic group as gypsies, but the political correct term is Roma. Now, I'm going back to the maps in a bit. Now, in terms of of the way that they practice Islam, we have both Sunnis, which is the vast majority of these people, but we have also some Shia sects, mainly Alliance, Kizilbashi, Bektashi, who live in northeast of the country there, the Shias. Also, this map shows you where the Muslim minority is concentrated in the country, is focused. You can see we have two main blocks, one in the south and southeast, close to the Turkish-Bulgarian border, but also northeast. I have also another map that gives, this is a map that gives a better idea of the Turkish-speaking Muslims in the country. It's really important because it will help us to understand why the Muslim Party, the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, which represented sort of the Muslim minority after the collapse of communism in 1989, where it was stronger and why. Now, as you can see here, the more red the color it is in the country, the biggest the concentration of Turkish-speaking Muslims it is. So in this administrative unit, in this county, if you want to use an American term, in Kırcalı, in Razgrad, in Silistri, in Târgoviște, and in Shumen, there is a big concentration of Turkish-speaking Muslims. Now, how did the Muslims end up in Bulgaria? Why there are Muslims in Bulgaria? Well, excuse me. The first documented Muslims in the country are historically recorded in the mid-9th century. We have Islamic missionaries which are mentioned by Pope Nicholas to the then king of Bulgaria, Boris, we are in the Byzantine period. But in the 11th and 12th centuries, we have nomadic tribes, Turkish-speaking most of them, the Cumans and Pechenegs, entered in Bulgaria coming from Asia, Central Asia. And some of them, they were Muslims. Then we have the Seljuk Turks arriving at around the 10th and 11th century. And then the biggest advancement of Islam in the region happened after the Ottoman conquest, which took place in the 14th century, 1362-1390 in Bulgaria. Some of these Muslims that came to Bulgaria during the time of the Ottoman conquest, they came voluntarily. But some others, they came because the Ottoman authorities, they gave motives and incentives to take them there. Because if you see, if I can take you back to the map, Bulgaria is situated strategically in the crossroads between the Middle East and Europe. And there were many important trade traffic and roads that cross the country. So, and most of them, they cross South Bulgaria, for example, via Ignatia in the Roman times and Byzantium later. And some of these trade routes were also used by the Ottomans and the people living in the area. So it was when the Ottomans conquered Bulgaria, the southern parts of the country were not populated that much. So they tried, the Ottomans, to encourage people to move, nomads, from Asia Minor to that area, and most of the people who moved there and went to Bulgaria were Muslims. Also, many people were converted to Islam during the Ottoman times, some voluntarily, some others not. For those of you who are familiar with the Ottoman history, one of the reasons for, one of the motivations for people to convert to Islam was taxation. Because the non-Muslims, they didn't pay that much tax as Muslims did. But also there are some recent research that point out to another factor, which is some of these Shia sects, like the Bektasis, for instance, which used practices in order to practice Islam, familiar to Christianity and non-Muslim religions, and made Islam much more receptive by the locals and led them to convert to Islam. Many Bulgarian-speaking people, but also Greek-speaking people in Greece and elsewhere, they converted to Islam due to the interaction with these Muslim sects, like the Bektasis, who, when they practiced Islam, they used practices and elements which reminded the people, their own religions, original religions, Christianity and others. In the Ottoman times, in Sofia, for example, the capital of the then capital of Bulgaria after the establishment of the Bulgarian state, there were about 2,356 mosques, 174 tekkes, sanctuaries for Muslim orders like the Alayas, the Gisilbasis, and so on, 142 madrasas, and 400 waqfs, which shows how strong it was, Islam, the practice of Islam and the Muslim religion in that part. Now, after the liberation, it is called by the Bulgarians, the proper term is after the establishment of the modern Bulgarian state, for somebody to be identified as Bulgarian, he had to complete two elements. The first was Bulgarian language, and the other was Bulgarian Eastern Orthodox religion. So Eastern Orthodox Christianity was very much aligned with the Bulgarian national identity. And as you can imagine, this automatically excluded the Muslims, which were regarded as second-class citizens in the Bulgarian state. I have to point out here that this was not a unique phenomenon to Bulgaria. I mean, it happened also in Greece and in other Orthodox countries in the Balkans. And Bulgarians were treated as second-class citizens. And this often complicated relations with the Ottoman Empire and Turkey, which wanted to present itself as the patron, as the protector of the Muslims living in Bulgaria and elsewhere in the Balkans. And this role was guaranteed often by international treaties. Now, let me make a big jump and go to the Second World War period. If you want, we can talk about the years before during the discussion. Now, after the Second World War, excuse me, the Communist Party took power in Bulgaria, and at the beginning it was very tolerant towards the Muslims. It encouraged Turkish-speaking people and non-Turkish-speaking Muslims to establish mosques, to have their own cultural life, theater, and so on. And this followed a general trend in the Eastern Europe in order to make themselves the communist parties presenting themselves as a really tolerant political parties, as which promoted internationalism among their citizens, that they wanted to make a break with the previous bourgeois past, if you like. And also, they bought in this way the Communist Party's time to establish themselves in power, because after the Second World War, there were new political forces and they wanted to establish themselves in power. Now, mid-1950s, this policy changed, and then the Bulgarian Communist Party was not that tolerant towards the Muslims. It started to cut down many of the privileges that provided in the past. Now, and it started to promote a policy of ethnic assimilation, believe it or not, towards their citizens. They wanted in this way to make most of them speak in Bulgarian and also not practice in Islam. And they tried to justify this policy that Islam was for them, a backward religion. I mean, they couldn't see the point of, for instance, Muslim women wearing particular, dresses and so on. They wanted to modernize them, but they had a really peculiar way of seeing modernization. They wanted themselves to stop practicing many elements that they did in the past. But they went a step further than that, because this was also a trend which could be found elsewhere. They started first in the 1960s with the Muslim gypsies, and they tried to force them to change their names, to replace their Muslim names with Bulgarian names. That campaign in the 1960s was pretty much successful, I have to say, and it didn't attract much international attention because we are at the peak of the Cold War period. The gypsies in Bulgaria complained, but they were a small minority, ethnic group inside the Muslim minority. The gypsies don't have a kind of a patron state like the Turkish-speaking Muslims in Bulgaria to jump and start making a fuss in the international fora. So many of them, they changed their names. So the Bulgarian communist authorities were very much pleased with that, and they said, well, our project is very successful. Let's move now to the Bulgarian-speaking Muslims. Now, with the Bulgarian-speaking Muslims, their task was much easier because they were speaking Bulgarian. Bulgarian-speaking Muslims, they were speaking Bulgarian. They were better integrated into the Bulgarian society. And they had some sort of a great success with them in the 1970s as well. where they faced real troubles in the 1980s were with the Turkish-speaking Muslims. In the mid-1980s, they started the so-called regenerative process, which was the third phase of their project, the third phase of their plan. In Bulgarian, the term is Regenerative Proces. Regenerative in Bulgarian language is a cognate of the Bulgarian term Возрождение, which means national awakening, and it is a term which is used to describe the process of creating a modern Bulgarian state and Bulgarian nationalism in the 19th century. In other words, euphemistically, the communist authorities, they wanted to say, now what we're trying to do with the Bulgarian Turks is to integrate themselves into their true nation. They developed this idea that you are not actually Turks, you're not supposed to be Muslims. You converted during the Ottoman times by the Ottoman authorities to Islam, now it's time to discover your true past. And what they did is, they used the police and the army, they sent them to mixed areas and non-mixed areas, they encircled the village, and they gave them, let's say, 28 hours to go and register under a Bulgarian name. If your name was, let's say, Ahmed or Sultan or whatever, you had 24 hours to go and change your name and make it, I don't know, Ivan or Stefan, for example, or whatever. And not only that, they moved as far as to go also to graves and cemeteries and change the name of your ancestors. It wouldn't make change. For instance, if your name was Ahmed, if your grandfather was called Ahmed, they went also to the cemetery and changed the name of your grandfather as well. Now, why they decided in the mid-1980s to do that? Well, there are different explanations. First of all, there was a power vacuum in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union in general controlled the Bulgarian policy, and not only the policies in Bulgaria, but also elsewhere in Eastern Europe. But in 1980s, the beginning of the 1980s, the long-serving Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev passed away. And after that, there was a succession of two leaders, Yuri Andropov and Konstantin Chernenko, each of them remaining in power for about a year. They were ill, old. So the Soviet political life was much more focused with what was going on in the Soviet Union, and didn't have time and it didn't want to focus on what was going on in Bulgaria. So it was the right moment for the Bulgarian political authorities to do that. Secondly, in the 1980s, the Bulgaria and other East European states, they followed economic decline. And they wanted, through nationalistic policies like that, which had a big appeal by the ethnic majority, to disorientate public attention. And the third reason is that there was a fear by the Bulgarian communist authorities that it would happen in Bulgaria what happened in Cyprus with Turkey. So, in other words, they were scared that Turkey would use the Muslim minority there as the Trojan force and encourage the Muslims to create a kind of autonomous state, or undermining the power of the Communist Party and so on. But that is the person you see here is the communist leader Todor Zhivkov. He conceived this idea of Regenerative Proces, this regenerative process. But this policy actually created a real revolt in ethnically mixed areas. The Turks, of course, the Turkish-speaking Muslims, they didn't like it. They started protesting. Turkey started protesting in international fora, in the United Nations, in the Islamic fora as well. And also the West jumped in. The United States and Western Europe also made a whole fuss about that. What is really interesting here, and this will lead me to my next point, the post-communist period, is that during that period we see a political radicalization among the Turkish-speaking Muslims. We have the creation of a clandestine organization called the Turkish Liberation Army, Turkish Liberation Party, by a Turkish-speaking Muslim in the University of Sofia called Ahmed Dogan, but after he changed his name, called Mehdi Doganov as a result of the regenerative process. He was in close collaboration with the Turkish authorities, and he tried also to make the Turkish-speaking Muslims to really rebel against and protest against this policy. And he was quite successful. As a result of the activities of this organization, and as a result of the international pressure, the Bulgarian communist leader Todor Zhivkov made a public statement in 1989. By the way, this is a picture to which I'm going to come in a bit. He made a public statement that whoever wants to leave the country is able to do so. He can have a passport and leave. And this led to a huge humanitarian crisis in 1989. About 300,000 Muslims responded positively, and they left Bulgaria and they went to Turkey. Now, what you see here in the picture is tents in the Bulgarian-Turkish border. This created a huge humanitarian crisis. People, they were living there and they were waiting permission by the Turkish authorities to enter the Turkish soil. This had severe consequences on the production side and the whole Bulgarian economy. Those people were, most of the Muslims there, they were farmers, and they left their harvest behind without, and this devastated the Bulgarian economy. And as a result, because Turkey could not accommodate all these people, closed its borders. And these people were trapped actually there. I mean, at the end it accepted most of them, but at the beginning it closed the border. Now, faced with this intolerable situation, the Soviets orchestrated a military coup in Bulgaria, which led the Bulgarian communist leader to leave power, to move away. So, in other words, communism collapsed in Bulgaria essentially as a result of the Muslim minority, not as a result of the ethnic majority. We have a different situation there. So democratization came, and this is really interesting, as a result of the treatment that a minority was receiving by the communist authorities. And now I'm going to my final points, which are focusing on the post-communist period, and I hope to have time for discussion on this, because I will not try to be exhaustive here and discuss everything. Now, communism collapsed in Bulgaria. Democratization came, general elections, freedom of speech, and so on. You remember that I told you about this Turkish national organization with Ahmed or Mehdi Doganov? This formed the basis for the establishment of the first Muslim political party in Bulgaria, the so-called DPS, which stands for Movement for the Rights and Freedoms. In the first general elections in June 1989 that took place in the country, DPS had problems. Ahmed Dogan was the leader of, and is still today the leader of that party. Well, it stepped down a couple of months ago, and he had also an incident. Somebody was trying to kill him in the Congress of his political party. But nevertheless, he has been the leader of this political party from 1989. until recently. So at the beginning, it had problems to register as a political party in the country. Why? Because the Bulgarian constitution does not allow the formation of political parties on an ethnic basis or on a religious basis. A. B. The Bulgarian ethnic majority protested. Especially in mixed areas, many people protested against the formation of the political party because they were afraid that many of the Muslims who left the country would return back. Why they were afraid of them returning back? Because they had confiscated their properties, many of the Bulgarian Muslims in mixed areas. And they didn't want to see them coming back and making claims on the properties that they had confiscated. Now, the DPS received in the first general elections about 4% of the population, most of them of the electoral vote, and 98% of the electoral basis of DPS was from the Muslims. But it was not successful in recruiting all of the Muslim votes there. Many of the Muslims, they were voted for other political parties. What is interesting with this political party is that it secured parliamentary presence all the way through from 1989 until today. It participated in various coalition governments, and it was a party that contributed to the political stability of the country. Not only that, but also it was quite crucial for the Western orientation and the pro-Western foreign policy of Bulgaria, acceptance to the European Union, but also to NATO. Now, and it was quite successful in becoming from a party which appealed mostly to the Muslim minority, to a liberal political party in the country that appealed to the entire ethnic population. Now, here is a map from the last elections in 2011, and wherever you see purple, the purple color here, it's the power of the DPS. You see, for example, that DPS secures to get votes not only from Turkish and Muslim areas like Kırgızali, for example, or Razgrad, or Targoviste, or Sumen, but it takes votes from Bulgarian ethnic areas like Pleven, for example, like Lovech, like Sofia, and elsewhere. I mean, less votes than in areas where the Muslim minority is big, but nevertheless it was quite successful in becoming a party that appeals also to gets votes from ethnic Bulgarians. It also succeeded in represented in the local government as well. But nevertheless, and the other thing which is quite important is that because Bulgaria in 1989 found itself to be at the brink of a war with Turkey as a result of this humanitarian crisis, and was facing an ethnic crisis, it didn't follow the path of Yugoslavia. And one of the reasons for that was because the Muslim party was represented in power, and it took all this tension and all these protests from the streets to the parliament inside. So the protest was transferred from the streets to the parliamentary debate. Now, you may ask me, did the DPS manage to solve and all this representation to make a difference in the life of Muslims all these years? Well, it fought for Muslim issues. For example, as a result of the collectivization process after the Second World War, many of the Muslims lost their farms. Most of them were tobacco workers in Bulgaria. And after the collapse of communism, the Muslim DPS was fighting for them to take back their lands, which they lost as a result of the collectivization process. It also fought and gave, for the interests of other, interests of Muslims in the parliament. However, it didn't manage to solve all the problems that the Muslim minority faces today. Which are those problems? First of all, unemployment, which is quite high among the young people, exceeds 50% of the population. In older generations, 35 to 40%. There is also discrimination among the Muslims by the state authorities and the police, especially in mixed areas, and especially towards the Romas, the Muslim Romas. However, the DPS, during the time of the Bulgaria's accession to the European Union, it was quite vociferous to push the Bulgarian authorities to take funds from the European Union for projects that would support the Muslim Romas by establishing schools, fighting illiteracy, fighting unemployment, and so on. And also there is discrimination in mixed areas by the rising political presence of a xenophobic and far right-wing party, Ataka, which appeared in the Bulgarian political life in 2005. The supporters of Ataka and the political activists of Ataka target areas, mixed areas, and sometimes beat people, try to scare them. It's a really xenophobic political party, and try to push and force Muslims leaving these mixed areas in the country altogether. Now, one of the support that the Muslims in Bulgaria received came both from Turkey but also from Saudi Arabia, especially during the first years of the post-communist period, because the Bulgarian authorities they didn't support that much the Muslims to have their own schools, or to create mosques, or to restore any damages in the mosques and so on. Many of the funds, most of the funds were coming from either Turkey or Saudi Arabia. So in short, and I would like to close here, is that we have the first time after the 1989 a political presence, the political representation of the Muslims in the Bulgarian political life through DPS. This representation improved significantly the life of the Muslims in the country, but it didn't solve all the problems. And I would like to leave everything here and open the floor to questions in case there are questions.